हेलो एवरीवन। लास्ट वीडियो में हमने क्वेश्चन नंबर 7 सॉल्व किया था, दैट इज प्रोडक्ट सेल्स एनालिसिस 1। सो इस वीडियो हम सॉल्व करने वाले हैं क्वेश्चन नंबर 8, दैट इज कस्टमर हु विजिटेड बट डिड नॉट मेक एनी ट्रांजैक्शंस। So let's get started. Okay, so the question says that it has two tables, that is visits table and transactions table. In the transactions tables, we have two columns, that is visit ID and customer ID. So visit ID is the column with the unique values for this table, which means this table will contain unique values, no duplicates exist, no duplicate visit ID exist. So this table information is about the customer who visited the mall. So for example, a customer has customer ID, and if he visits the mall, then there is an entry which has unique ID and that customer's unique ID, right? So if he again visited the same mall, then the customer ID will be same, but the visit ID will be different. Okay. So the other table is transactions. So the transactions has three columns: transaction ID, visit ID, and amount. So visit ID is the visit ID from this visits table. Amount is the money they might have spent it or something else, and transaction ID is related to this amount on this visit ID. So transaction ID is unique here. When a customer visits the mall, a visit ID is created, and if he made any transactions while on a visit, then a transaction ID, visit ID, and amount entry will be created in the transactions table. So this table contains information about the transaction made during the visit ID. So what we have to do is write a solution to find the IDs of the users who visited without making any transactions and the number of times they made these types of visits. And we can return the result table sorted in any order. So what the question is asking is we have to return the users who visited the mall or any places and didn't purchased anything, or in simple language didn't made any transactions on that visit. So for example, a customer with the ID 10 visited the mall for 10 times, but he didn't made any transaction. Then the transaction table will have 0 entries, but this visits table will have 10 entries, in which the customer ID will be same in all the 10 entries, but the visit ID will be different in each entry. So let's look at this example. So in the visits table, we see that the customer ID 23, this customer has visit ID 1. Then there is a different customer, that is 9. Customer with customer ID 54. This customer visited the mall three times, right? And you see in the transaction table only the customers with the visit ID of 2, 1, and 5 had made the transactions, which means 2, this person 9 visited the mall and also made transactions. The person with the visit ID of 5, that is 54, also made transactions on the visit. The one and the one with the visit ID of 1, that is customer ID 23. Okay, so the customer with the customer ID 54 visited this place three times with the visit ID of 8, with the visit ID of 7 and 5. And you see that with the visit ID 5 we have an entry, which means he made three transactions on this visit ID, but when he visited with the visit ID of 7 and 8, he didn't made any transaction. So the customer 54 didn't made transaction on two visits. Okay. Then there is other customers. For example, 96. He visited the mall with the visit ID of 6 and there is no entry in the transaction. So he visited one time and he didn't made any transaction on that. Now other one is 30. 30 visited one time only and there is no transaction entry. So the count of number of transactions is 1. So the customer with the ID of 30 didn't made any transaction on the visit. So this count no transaction means he didn't made any transaction on this number of visits. And then other is 9. So you see 9 has visit ID of 2. He visited only once and he made the transaction. So it will not be included in this resulting table. Then there is 23 with the visit ID of 1. So 23 customer visited one time and he made the transaction. So the resulting table won't contain this entry. So we have three entries for the customer 54, visited 3 times but didn't made any transaction 2 times. Customer with the ID of 30 visited once and didn't made any transactions. Same for the 96. So we will write the three solutions for this problem. Each solutions is having somewhat optimization in that. So let's start with using the join. So what sort of join should we use in these tables? So you see the question is asking that we want the visits or the customer IDs. You see in the resulting table we want the customer IDs. So all the customer IDs exist in this table, right? Because this is the main table. When a customer visits, the entry is created in this table. So this is the main table here. So we want customer ID from this table. And you see that we want the customer IDs which are not in this table. So we will be using the left join, which means we want everything from this table, but not those entries in which the visit ID of visits table exist in this table. So what I'm saying is that you see that 54 has a visit ID of 5. So in the transactions table, we have the visit ID 5, which means we don't want this entry, but we want these two entries because these two entries has visit ID of 7 and 8, but that does not exist on this table. When we left join this table with transactions table, you see when the join is happening, we will have a key. That is when we do the left join, we pass a condition that do the left join on this condition. When the condition matches, we will get the resulting output. So in this case, our if we write the condition as if the visit ID in this table is equal to visit ID in this transactions table, then what will happen is that if the visit ID in this table matches with the visit ID in this table, then the full entry will be returned, else the left table will be returned as it is, but on the right table we will be having null values. So what I'm saying is that select customer ID from visits left join, and the condition will be that on visits table visit ID is equal to transactions dot visit ID. Now let's see what's the result of this query. So you see we got the result. So what we got is visits does not exist. Okay, from visits left join this. Okay, so the result is we got the customer IDs, and let's select everything so that you understand what the left join is doing here. So you see we got the visit ID and customer ID from left table, transaction ID, visit ID and amount ID from the right table. And we use the condition that visit ID must be equal to transactions dot visit ID. So you see the visit ID in both the tables are same. Okay, but if the visit ID in the left table does not match with any visit ID in the right table, we will be having null entries. So you see this customer with ID of 30 has visit ID of 4. He visited the mall but did not made any transactions. That's why the transactions entry has null values in it, right? Similarly, you see the 54. It has visit ID of 5 and he visited here and made a transaction of 300, right? Then he again visited with the visit ID of 5 and he made a transaction of 310. Then he again visited with the visit ID of 5 and didn't made any transaction. Then again with the visit ID of 8, he didn't made any transaction. You see, we have two entries with the same visit ID here. This shows that the customer with the ID of 54 visited once, that is visit ID of 5, and on that visit he made two transactions, that is 300 and 310. Then there is two different entries which is on the visit ID of 7 and 8, he made no transactions, right? So what entries we want is we want where the visit ID in the right table is null. So we will use condition here, where in the transactions table visit id is null. So you see the result is, now we got visit id, customer id, and transactions in all the cases is null. So you see here we have visit ID of 4, 6, 7, and 8. Two entries of 54, one is 30, and then the customer ID with 96. But we don't want this right table. We want in the left table only customer IDs. But let's first see how to get the second column. Count number of transactions, count no transactions, right? So it has one transaction, and this is two transactions. So we'll group by this customer ID, right? So group by, we'll use customer ID from visits table. And when we group, we can write here that we want only customer ID and the count of that group. And we want the name of the group as this. And we don't want the right table. That's why we have written these two columns. The first column will be customer ID. Okay. And the other column is count star, which is when we are grouping, group by this customer ID. So this is a single entry, and this will be merged. So the merged is count star, which will return 2 here. Here it will return 1, 1, and then here on the group it will return 2. So let's see what the result of this query. So as you can see that the result of our query ran successfully. Now let's try to submit this. So our solution got accepted. Now let's try to submit this solution using other methods. So the next solution is by not using the left join, but instead checking if the visit ID exists in the transactions table. So what I mean is we will select customer ID from visits table, because this is the table which contain all the customer IDs, where the visit ID from this visits table is not in. Select visit ID from transactions, right? Now let's see the result of this query. So the result says that is 30, 96, 54, and 54. Now we'll group these using customer ID. Since we are using single table, we don't have to write this customer ID, and then this grouping we will select this as count no transactions. Okay, so this is our result, which is correct. Now let's try to submit this. So our solution got accepted. Now let's try the third solution, and that is using cache. So you see in this query, we are running this condition where visit ID not in. So this query select visit ID from transactions. So transaction is a big table, right? Big in the sense that the entry has 3 columns. We can reduce this selection using only a single column only. What I mean is that we'll create a cache beforehand, that is with valid visit IDs as. Now we'll select only the visit ID beforehand, and then from this temporary table we will select everything. Now we'll see that if the query works fine or not. Okay, we'll have to remove this semicolon. Now let's try again. So you see our solution got accepted. Now let's try to submit this. But before that, let's understand what is going on in here. So with this keyword, create a temporary table. So this temporary table exists in this transaction only. What I mean by transaction is that when this select query or this query completes, this temporary table is destroyed. So this temporary table exists only for this context, right? It is not permanent. So we stored the result of the valid visit IDs because when the user or the customer visits the mall, they created the transaction, and for that I called this valid. Now we will select customer ID and the count as count no transaction from visits table, and in the visits table we check if the visit ID in the visits table, if it is not in this valid visit ID, which means that the customer didn't made any transactions, and we will group by customer ID, and that group result we will count and store as count no transactions. So our this solution also get accepted.